Hi there. Welcome to the eLearning Champions Pod. I'm Shalini, your host for today, and I'm very excited to have with us Wendy Williams, who is the design and development lead for a tax company, and she's been in this space for the last more than 20 years. So, a very warm welcome to Wendy.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I appreciate that.
I'd like to throw open this session by asking you to share a little bit about your journey.
Well, it started so many moons ago with my first Commodore computer, where we learned that computing was the wave of the future. Um, since then, I've come a long way. I've done technical support for upwards of 20 years. I owned a computer training facility where I taught people everything from Windows and financial software to how to communicate online and use social media marketing. So quite varied in that regard. Um, Once I left teaching, though, I went into doing technical support and managing my household. I raised my family. I took care of my handicapped husband. We did all of these things all at the same time. And I became a virtual assistant,
Mhm.
which for me was an incredible experience because it opened up the entire world to me.
Right.
I did everything from bookkeeping to web design to social media marketing, you name it, I did it all. And it gave me a really broad background to bring into the technical support and the tech design that I'm doing now. So
Right.
I'm the lead designer and technical writer for the tax education department.
Wow.
Um, yeah, we teach about 15,000 people a year how to do taxes. And I
Wow.
designed the tax portion of the educational materials.
Fantastic. I mean, for
Yeah.
somebody who's challenged when it comes to have anything to do with taxes, this sounds phenomenal.
Yeah,
Can't wait to hear
I
what
don't
you
do
say.
taxes. I don't do
Yeah, but you
taxes.
train professionals.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun and I'm learning a lot about taxes, whether I wanted to or not. So
Right. Sounds great. Once again, a very warm welcome to you, Wendy, and to all our
thank you.
listeners. So
Thank
let me
you.
dive right into the first question for today. What challenges do you face in implementing learning and development programs in tax education, and well, how do you overcome them?
Well, basically, I mean, there's two major challenges. The first is the same one we all have, budget. And the second one, I imagine we all have as well, as the aversion to change.
Oh, absolutely.
So, as far as the budget goes, between staffing and tools and all of the things necessary to generate um, online or even print materials, it can be very daunting and a little bit scary. you know, um, we are all across the board in every industry, I believe, challenged with doing twice the work with half the resources and half the time. As technology
Right.
goes, the world thinks that we should be able to just snap our fingers and things are done. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the goal. So we're always looking for new and exciting ways to bring technology in to combat that issue. Um, we try to compare the cost of how we do it now, staff, material, time, all of that, and compare it to how much does the technology actually cost. Because a lot of
Right.
times the big sticker price is really scary. And you look at that and go, oh, that's not in our budget. We can't afford that. But
Right.
then if you say, well, we pay this and it saves us this much in staff and this much in time and this much in everything else, the two tend to more balance out. So if we can bring that cost close and save lots of time, sometimes it's worth it to pay a little bit more to save the time and be able to get 3 times more work done. So we
Right.
try to weigh those things together and come up with a happy medium that allows us to use technology, but not exclusively, because certainly we still have to do a lot of it ourselves.
Right. Right.
Once we get that and we say, okay, this is great, we can save all this money, we can save all this time, let's do this, then we have to decide if we can get our staff to buy into it. And I
Right.
know that that's common. Being a teacher as a virtual assistant for all those years, it's hard sometimes to bring people kicking and screaming into the new century.
Right.
So we have to make it as simple as possible. We have to utilize all of the available training opportunities for us too. So not only are we creating the training, but we're using the technology trainers. We're
Right.
using our in-staff people to create training for our staff so that they can come on board. And then hopefully between those two things, we can then embrace some of the wonderful new technologies that are available to us.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I think you've summed up the main challenges that which you said are, across the domain, regardless of the industry one is from. The
Yeah,
resistance to change, the adoption of new technologies, especially when budgets, kick in.
yeah.
So talking about technologies and digital learning, well, one thing is for certain, digital learning is here to stay. So, what are your views on areas where it is particularly impactful and areas where you feel it's not really very suitable?
Well, again, that's a great question. I love that question because we're in an industry that has a lot of very specific compliance, a lot like a healthcare industry might have. The
Right,
IRS has said to us, you can do these things and only these things, and you can't do anything else.
right,
And because we provide training to people who are going to do tax returns, they have to be able to qualify and they have to be able to earn their credits and they have to have continuing education, which we provide. So to do that, we
mhm,
have to really toe the line and make sure that we are staying in compliance with
right,
the regulations. In addition to the fact that those laws and rules and regulations change every single year.
right.
So we can't, you know, create it and they will come. We have to create it and then we have to change it and then we have to change it again. And we have to do that every single year, no matter what, because it changes
Wow,
every year.
right,
So that gives us a lot to be concerned about. The IRS has come out very clearly and said you cannot use AI to create courses. People
okay.
have to create the courses. So
Okay, so that's a stated
that is
policy.
a rule. That is absolute hard and
Okay.
fast rule. So
Uh-huh.
we have to now go at it from a different direction.
Mhm.
We can use AI to do things like create an outline, maybe even give us talking points. We can use it to evaluate things that we've done. But in the end, our subject matter experts have to write the material.
Okay, right.
So now comes the challenge of if they have to write it anyway, what can we do to simplify that for them?
Mhm.
The outlines are one way.
Right.
Another way is we're using AI to do things like create the exams.
Oh,
They wrote
yes.
the material, but now we feed that material into the AI and say, I need this many questions. They need to be question multiple choice. They have to have 4 choices and, give it all the parameters. And then it can spit out the test for us. So
Right.
something that took them hours or days to do in the past, I can now do in under 10 minutes.
Wow, that's the power of AI. So, Wendy,
Yeah.
do you have, when you say AI, are you referring to the Gen AI tools against which there is a strict no use policy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
the writing tools. So Gen
right,
AI that would write material. We can
right,
use AI for voice, which we do. We can use AI for graphics, which we also do.
right,
But it's the text. And I think it's because of the nature of the law and the fact that, as we all know, AI can make stuff up.
right, right. So, do you have a licensed Because you have enterprise versions, licensed versions of these Gen AI tools too.
Yes.
So, is there something like that in house?
Yes.
Okay.
We
Despite that, you're taking every precaution to
Yeah,
not
and our legal
expose.
department had to talk with them and negotiate with them and redo user agreements and privacy agreements and everything else before we could even think about using it,
Right.
because the compliance is so intense. But they've done that, and currently we are using Copilot
Hmm.
for most of our Gen AI. Um, we have we have a couple of different options for voiceover. We have a
Right.
subscription to Murph AI, which we may or
Oh,
may not be
yes.
keeping because we use Articulate and Storyline for
Oh,
the
yes.
majority of our design. And they have some really dynamic voiceover options now as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's possible that we're going to migrate into using their tool since we already have it.
Right.
Um, can save that money so we can get something else. Because it's all about the
Absolutely.
budget, right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. We're doing quizzes. I mean, that's the biggest thing we're doing with it right now. Being able to do a quiz. If you're not doing it yet, you should be. You take the material, you plug it into the AI, and you give it your parameters, and it spits out a test just like that.
Yes, yes, we've done it. We've been one of the earliest adopters of these Gen AI tools at Comlab
Yeah,
India.
it's
It's
just
like magic.
amazing. It is.
Of
It is
course,
like
it does
magic.
need the human to validate the output because, as you said, AI is not infallible, and it
Right.
does require the instructional design aspect to be very strong before you
Right.
can call it a robust course, or
Right.
robust
Well,
training materials.
so in addition to that, though, one of my favorite things about AI at this point is the ability to create custom graphics.
Yes.
There are lots of ways to do that. You can do, little cartoons or illustrations or whatever. But for us, one of the greatest tools that it's given us is the ability to do photographic work that
Mhm.
is original. Because we're doing taxes and because we're dealing in that environment, a lot of times our scenarios are very, very specific.
Right.
So our SMEs will come up with a statement that says, we're working on, I don't know, the child tax credit, for example.
Mhm.
So we have a married couple, we have a 2-year-old child, and we have a 10-year-old child. One's a boy and one's a girl. Well, go look at your clip art and your stock photos and try and find that exact image.
Right.
Oh yeah, and don't forget their
Yes.
grandma lives with them.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
So it becomes very complicated trying to find, and you spend hours and hours and days trying to find an image that represents what they're trying to portray. Now
Right.
I can use a Gen AI and tell it this is exactly what I need, and it will
Right.
do it for me. And if I can't figure out how to do it, I go over to the Gen AI and I tell it, this is what I need. Write me a prompt for it. And then it creates the prompt that I can put in my image creator, and I get this beautiful image as a result. So,
Wow, that's really
yeah,
interesting. That's a very innovative technique of using Gen AI to
I
draft your
love
prompt and
using my
then
Gen
feed it.
AI to create my prompts. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I
It's
know.
so much
I've
better
been
than I
doing
will
that.
ever be.
Right, right. It's really become such a fun thing now to be able to leverage one AI to give us input to feed into the other AI tool. I've been using this
Exactly.
too, and it's great.
Exactly.
So
And
yeah.
then finally, like I said, we do bring in the voice AI. So, where in the past we had staff members spending hours and days recording our book, our online courses are 25 chapters. It's like a
Okay.
40 some hour course, something like that. And having
Wow.
somebody do voiceover for all of that took an enormous amount of time. Being able to do it in an AI generator and just dump the text in it and do a little tweaking and throw it in and updating it next year because this sentence changed up here and this sentence down here changed, and not have to re-record the whole thing is
Right.
it's a miracle.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Wow. So a 40-hour training program, I think that's really intense.
it is.
The learner experience. And I can see how, using all these can really make it come alive, make it engaging.
Yeah. Well, and that's the hard part because, as you said, it's a lot to keep
Yeah.
engaged and it's a very technical topic. So
Right,
keeping them engaged instead of nodding off while you're talking about laws and rules and guidelines is a
right,
challenge for sure.
right.
Um,
So,
but this has really given us some choices. So,
yeah. So, Wendy, given that you have these very lengthy course materials, stretching to 40 hours, and you have been using AI to, make it come alive in terms of the visuals and in terms of the outlines and the assessments. So, how else is AI reshaping, tax education in terms of other interactive elements? So, do you
well,
have
I
any
mean,
examples you could share of tools that have made a significant impact?
sure. We use, as I mentioned earlier, we use Murph and we use Storyline for our audio, which
Right.
has been amazing. And it's hard to tell the difference these days. Voice has come so far that it doesn't
Absolutely.
sound like a computer anymore. It still struggles over a few words, but for the most part, it's very conversational and very easy to work with.
Right.
Um, so that's voice. We use Adobe InDesign when working
Uh-huh.
with our print material. They have built-in AI as well now. So we're able to
Right.
use that to help bring interactivity into our printed book, which sounds crazy because obviously a printed book is on a page. But you take that printed book and we put it into a digital online version.
Uh-huh.
And that's where our interactivity comes in. You can print
Right.
it and you can look at it and you can read it, but you can also use it online. And then it'll ask you questions, and the questions you click and you get answers. It will enlarge your images. It will do all of these different things that you can't get from a regular printed material.
Right.
So that's been a big addition in the last 2 to 3 years. We've really been leaning into that digital aspect of the material so that we can bring that engagement
Right.
into the dry reading that comes with a printed book. Um,
Right.
we use things like I said, we have the enterprise version of Copilot. We also use Firefly for image creation, as well as the others. We have Canva, we use Firefly, we use DALI, we
Right.
use Copilot, and we get images from all of those places.
Right.
Um, but that's kind of
What,
it.
yeah. What about feedback? I mean, since when you put this book online and
Mhm.
you incorporate all these interactivities and probably simulations, you can even embed them. What
Correct.
about feedback to learners? Because once again, there's a danger of it becoming a somewhat passive reading experience.
Right. And I'll be honest, because it was just a book for all those years and it wasn't online, it was very passive.
Mhm.
We have got I don't know that we've gotten any negative feedback from the digital book. Everybody who uses it loves it. Not everybody uses it because some people will never give up their book.
Right.
But, never, never. I used to be that way. No, Kindle? No, I'm not going to do that. No way. I got to have my book in my hand. Then I found out my Kindle was waterproof. So now I can go to the beach and
Okay.
I can go to the pool. And so I'm sold. But it takes more than that to sell some people. So, but those who use the digital book love it. They love the interactivity of it. They love being able to, for example, in the past, we would have an example, and that example would give you all of the information.
Right.
This person made this much money. They have this many children. They are head of household and they are blah, blah, blah. So they can claim the child tax deduction, right? But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to
Mhm.
give them all that information and then say, can they claim the child tax credit? Now we can do that because they have to click to see the answer.
Right.
So we
Right.
can lay it all out. And it's not a knowledge check per se, but it's an example. Here's an example of a real live
Right.
everyday
Right.
situation. What do you think?
Right.
And then we give them the opportunity to think about it before we just tell them what the answer
Exactly.
is.
Yeah.
Um, so they've really embraced that. They really like it. Um, Being able to just click on an image and enlarge it as opposed to scrolling and resizing your screen and all of that is something else that they really enjoy. So we're taking baby steps and we're bringing it in a little bit at a time because it still has to match the printed book.
Right.
It's,
Right.
it's not just an online product. It's not just a digital product. They have to be able to look at the screen and look at the book and know that it's exactly the same thing. So
Right.
that does
Right.
make it challenging what we can bring into it, but the things that we have brought in, they like.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
So, I think this book that you talked about, the digital
mhm.
version as well as the print version, is that the flagship product that you
It
lead
is.
the
We have,
design and development
it
of?
has two
Okay.
facets. It has the printed book, which is also digital,
Right.
but then it
Right.
has online modules that you can
Right.
take as a self-study. So it's
Right.
two pieces of the same puzzle.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
They match.
right. I think you have shared a little bit of the journey, the transition from the print to the digital and the
Yeah. So,
challenges you faced. And
right.
it's very heartening to know that, it was well received. Both versions are well
Yeah.
received. Now, that's quite an
So,
achievement.
right. And then the whole
No.
online product is so totally different. That's a whole separate piece. We do
Right.
each chapter as an individual module,
Uh-huh.
and that is entirely online and it is entirely self-driven. So they can take that instead of the book and digital version of the book are generally for traditional classrooms. They have an
Right.
instructor. The instructor has either the online or a PowerPoint to lead the course, and they have the book to support them.
Right.
The other option is to take it as a self-study. And then each chapter has its own online module that is completely self-study. You go in, you read it, it talks to you, it does the AI voice for you. It has a lot of interactivity. Click this button to see this example, click that button to follow through the whole process. Here's a knowledge check, which gives you immediate feedback. Here's the end of course assessment that will grade you and send it off for your scores. So it's a whole different animal.
Right. So I'm curious, Wendy, the self-study component, is that also 40 hours?
Yes,
Okay. And how is it spaced? How do you generally space it?
by
Um,
chapter. It's by chapter, and each chapter can be anywhere from, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour to a couple hours for something that's more complex.
right.
Because it's 25 chapters. So you break that out and it works out to be about 40 hours. Um, but we'll have anywhere from, say, 75 slides to 180 slides. Just depends. Some topics are much more complicated than others. Um,
Right.
and that would include the exams and everything. So
Right.
it's a lot to maintain on an annual basis and update every single year. Um, 3 years ago, we decided to completely redesign our online product. So we created brand new templates, a whole new look and feel. We got rid of a lot of the old standard cartoony graphic kind of stuff and
Mhm.
solid colors and moved into comfortable photographic images that portray
Right.
what we're talking about. Sometimes it's the background of the entire slide with moving parts that come up on top of it, explaining what you're
Right.
looking at,
Right.
things like that. We have a
Right.
lot of forums, though. I mean, we have a lot of forums. So a lot of times it's text and form. And here's
Okay.
what goes on this form, and here's
Right.
circling things and movement that draws your eye to where you're putting information, things
Right.
like that to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
And sometimes if it's a complicated process, we're going to claim the child tax credit. Well, there's like 10 steps involved in that. So here's the form, you fill this out, and then you take this information and you put it on that form, and then you take this information and you put it onto that form. And so then we'll have not scenarios, but
Simulations, maybe, of the forms
we
and
do
so on.
simulation practices, but this is more like a step by step,
Okay.
where you click this button and you see this whole interaction, and then it moves you to the next screen, which shows you the next interaction. So it's a more step process through the whole thing.
Right.
At the end of each chapter, though, at least the first bulk, first mandatory chapters, some of them are optional, but the first 10 chapters are really the core. So several of those have interactive simulations.
Okay.
Where the software is actually in the background, and we ask you a question and you have to fill in the form yourself.
Right.
As you would in the software.
Right.
So that's brand new also in the last few years.
I'm sure that's been highly effective.
It is. Everybody loves them. I mean, there's always, when you get into that technical amount of interactivity, there's often a few glitches here and there, but they're minor. And for the most part, people are going, this is so great. We never got to use the software before. It was always print out the forms and fill out the forms, but that didn't teach them how to use the software.
Right.
So
and it's
now
a risk-free environment. So that makes it, that takes all the pressure off.
Exactly. And so that's been amazing. So that's kind of what we've been up to the last few years, is just bringing more hands-on activity to both processes.
Right. So Wendy, I'm curious, when learners take these online, the online courses, the modules, are they expected to do it in one stretch, or is there some time needed?
Not necessarily. Well, yes, to both. Okay. You have to have it done to get the credit in time to do your tax returns. And usually you start the class and you have a month or two to do it, or whatever, few weeks. But you can't just do part of it and then come back and do it 3 months from now. You have to have it done in order to qualify to do tax returns.
Right. And
so you do it on your own time. You can do an hour at a time here and an hour at a time there, but you do have to complete the course.
Right. And
at least the first 10
have to be renewed every year because, as you said, changing tax rules and so on.
Not the 40-hour course. Okay. So when you start, you take the 10 hours, the first 10 courses, which is probably 15 hours. And that's what you have to do to become qualified with us and with the IRS. Right. With us mostly. And then the rest of it is as needed and as you want. So it's more detailed information on specific, more advanced topics above and beyond the basics. Okay. It's still part of the overall umbrella of fundamentals, but it's the more advanced part. Right. You do that the first year. And sometimes you do it the second year too, because it's a lot of information to absorb at one time. And once you've done it for a year, it helps to go back and review it and go, oh, I didn't catch that last year, right? But after that, we have continuing education courses. And we have probably 100 of those. Okay. We don't update them all every year, thank God. We never could. But we do probably update 5 or 6 or 7 a year. So we spend about 6 months doing the book and the online courses that go with it. And then we spend the other 6 months doing these continuing education courses. So that they stay as current as possible and give people the information they need. Right. And then we have little spotlights, which are little hour courses that you can take just to refresh on or dig deep into one specific little thing. Right. So, yeah. So, actually, I was wondering about that. What if somebody needed to revisit something or go slightly deeper into one area where they feel they're not confident enough? So there you have your solution. Well, like, for example, maybe you're just trying to figure out how to do a 1099 K, which is the new thing for gig workers that they're doing.
Mhm.
That's brand new, and there's a whole lot of rules around it.
Right.
So, yes, it's part of the main course, but it's just touched on. Yes, it's here, and but we have a spotlight. It's an hour course that does nothing but talk about that.
Right.
So they
Right.
can go in and they can say, okay, I'm doing a 1099K. This is what I need to know. I'm doing
Okay.
income forms for my 1099s. This is what I need to know. I am doing virtual currency. This is what I need to know.
Wow.
So those we update annually.
So I think going by what you've shared so far, you and your team must be constantly on your toes, meeting the learning
Always.
needs of the organization.
It used to be that
Wonderful.
we had an off season and an on season, but not anymore.
Right. Right. So, Wendy, you mentioned, when you shared a little bit about your journey that you also had a background in technical writing. So you have a
I
very
do.
unique hybrid role, really, both
I
as a
do.
technical writer and a design lead. So how do you
Yeah.
balance these responsibilities and what are the advantages that, this dual role brings to your projects?
Yeah. Well, I actually love doing both.
Uh-huh.
So that's a plus.
Right.
But usually when we start on this journey for the book every year, we start with the tech writing. And that is the hardbound printed book with the digital version. And I have to go through, I design it. But even more than that is I just have to make sure that the information is being presented in a palatable way.
Right.
So we design it so that it looks good and it flows well and it's comfortable for people to interact with. But then we also have to look at it from a technical aspect. Taxes are technical, and our SMEs, bless their heart, are technical because they have to be. That's their
Right.
job.
Right.
But then I have to look at it and say, okay, does it have to be that technical? Is it necessary to speak up here when we can say the same thing down here and make it more accessible and more understandable? Because sometimes, if you've ever read a law, you can't understand them. They just
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
make sense unless you're a lawyer.
True.
So,
Very true.
it helps to bring it a little bit more palatable, make it a little bit more accessible,
Right.
um, and put it into a language that people can understand. And so we do a lot of that. It lets me work with the SMEs a lot, where I'll go and say, okay, I just read this 6 times and I have no idea what it means. Can you help
Right.
me? And then they explain it to me and I go, oh, that makes sense. Can we say it like this instead?
Right. Right.
Because now I understand it.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a lot of fun to be able to work with them and massage it into a way that it is awesome instead of just
Right.
putting it out there. Um, Once we get that where we want it, then we go to the online course. We say, okay, it's done. We know what the book is going to look like. We know the material that we're presenting. We know what we want them to learn. Now let's turn that into slides.
Right.
And so then we take it and we go through the same material, but now we're rewriting it a little bit. The notes are going
Right.
to be right out of the book, but the slides have to be different because we can't put all that text on a slide. We have
Right.
to learn how to present it graphically.
Right.
So now we're taking the information that we've already worked on and learned and adapting it in a new way. And having worked on it so intently to begin with makes that a little bit easier
Right.
because I'm more
And
familiar with the material.
right, right. And I think that is probably the most effort intensive part, to get those inputs from the SME and tweak them in a language the learner understands, simplify complex
Yeah, it is,
concepts
but
and procedures.
it is. But then when you move to the online, you have that same process all over again because now you're condensing it into a slide, but you don't want to lose what's
It's
important.
sense.
So
Right,
now I'm taking all of their words that are awesome and great and very explanatory, and I have to make them make sense in 20 words or less on a
right.
slide, right?
Yeah,
as an
Right.
example. And I use AI to do that sometimes. I'll say,
Right.
here's a complex topic and it's
Right.
4 paragraphs and I need it to go on a slide. Tell me what to do.
Right.
If I need to use 2 slides, I'll use 2 slides, but tell me how to break that down, and suggest the images that are going to go with it so that I can get that point across in a meaningful way.
Right. Yeah,
So,
thanks, Wendy. I mean, that gives us a glimpse into what goes on in the background of creating learning materials for in
yes.
the domain of tax education.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think it's really worked out very well for you to
Yeah.
have this technical writing background and bring it together with the instructional
Yeah.
design that goes into all of this. And I'm sure
Yeah.
your learners are greatly benefited by this.
It's really intense, but I think that that's what I love about it the most. I love the challenge and I love the opportunity and I love the satisfaction of knowing that somebody got something out of what I put out there, you
Right.
know, that
Absolutely.
somebody actually learned something and was able to make a career from the
That's
training material that
satisfying.
I created. It's so fulfilling.
Absolutely. And especially given how tough this particular domain is, at least to a person
Yeah.
like me, it
Yeah.
literally, is rocket science. But, when you
It
have
is.
fantastic instructional designers working on the materials, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
demystifying a lot of things and making it, as you said, highly accessible to
Yeah.
learners.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Wendy, for those stories that you've shared and the glimpses you've given us into what it is to create, design, and develop materials for tax
Yes.
professionals.
Well, thank you for
And
having
once
me.
again, thank you so much once again for accepting and invite. And thank you, listeners. And do stay tuned in for our future podcast sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.